About a decade ago, I used to operate trucks for a living. It wasn't the long-haul type. I steered clear of overnight jobs. My vehicle of choice was a box truck sans sleeper cab, making for solitary journeys across the countryside. I didn't mind the solitude much, finding solace in the patter of rain on the truck's roof as I navigated remote highways flanked by farmlands. On one such rainy, overcast day, fatigue began to creep in despite the clock reading only late afternoon. I contemplated stopping for a coffee at the next service station. The truck I was driving that day was an older model from the company fleet, well-maintained but with idiosyncratic gear shifts that only a select few, including myself and my boss, could master. As I trundled along, a car caught my attention, nestled in a shallow ditch by the roadside. It appeared stuck, but not severely damaged. Sensing someone might need assistance, I pulled over, braving the drizzle. Upon inspecting the vehicle, I found it abandoned, its owner nowhere in sight. Suddenly, footsteps approached from behind, and I turned to face a disheveled man, claiming ownership of the stranded car. He explained his misfortune, attempting to flag down help for the past hour. Despite the inherent risk, I offered him a lift to the nearest town or service station, suggesting we could arrange a tow from there since there was no cell service in the area. Grateful, he accepted, and we retreated to my truck, rain still drizzling lightly. As we embarked on the journey, however, a sense of unease settled in. The man's demeanor became increasingly unsettling, his gaze evasive, conversation terse. Then, abruptly, he brandished a knife, demanding I pull over and exit the vehicle. Shocked but composed, I complied, witnessing him fumble with the unfamiliar gears as he attempted to drive off. After a brief struggle, he abandoned the truck and fled into the surrounding fields. I waited until I was certain he was gone before reclaiming the driver's seat and continuing my journey. Upon reaching a signal, I alerted the authorities, who later confirmed the abandoned car was stolen and matched the description of the suspect. I resumed my duties with caution, refraining from picking up strangers for a considerable time. Eventually, however, I eased back into old habits, exercising greater discernment in selecting passengers. Thankfully, I never encountered a similar ordeal again. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel to stay tuned. Last Thanksgiving, I found myself on my annual pilgrimage to visit family who live out of town. My parents still reside in the same house where I spent my formative years, while I moved away over a decade ago. The journey to my hometown typically spans about 4 hours, bearing any major traffic delays. Departing from my family's abode in the late afternoon, I had hoped to beat the rush hour congestion. However, luck was not on my side that day. The city streets were congested with vehicles by the time I hit the highway, leading back to my hometown. Night had already descended upon the landscape, casting an eerie glow over the familiar route. Despite the chaos of urban traffic, the highway offered a welcome respite with sparse vehicles traversing its lanes. My hometown, being smaller than the city I currently reside in, meant that the highway I traveled on was considerably quieter, save for the occasional car zooming past. About an hour and a half away from my destination, I noticed a dark pickup truck trailing behind me. Its presence felt intrusive as it followed closely behind, its headlights glaring in my rearview mirror. Though I initially dismissed it, expecting the driver to overtake me, the truck persisted in tailgating me, almost provocatively. As minutes passed without respite, the truck suddenly switched on its high beams, flooding my car with blinding light, obscuring my vision of the road ahead. Panic surged within me as I grappled with the fear of an imminent collision. With no knowledge of the driver's intentions, I made the decision to pull over, hoping to avoid any confrontation. As I maneuvered my car to the roadside, I anticipated the truck to continue its journey past me. Instead, it came to a stop behind me, leaving me to face the unknown. A figure emerged from the truck, towering in stature, but details were obscured in the darkness. Instinct screamed danger, prompting me to retrieve the legally owned pistol I kept for protection. Though I had never before wielded it outside of a shooting range, the ominous presence closing in on my car urged me to arm myself. With trembling hands, I held the weapon out of sight, but within reach, hoping its mere presence would deter any aggression. The man approached my car, pounding on the window with unintelligible shouts, his visage contorted with rage. Despite my attempts to defuse the situation, his hostility only escalated. Then, in a swift motion, he brandished a firearm of his own, thrusting the encounter into a perilous realm. Faced with imminent danger, I acted on instinct, firing a single shot through my window. The deafening report echoed in the confines of my car as the assailant staggered back, affording me the opportunity to flee. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I sped away, casting anxious glances in my rearview mirror. But the truck did not pursue. Finding a safe haven to collect my thoughts, I reflected on the gravity of my actions. The realization that I had discharged my weapon in self-defense weighed heavily upon me as I awaited the arrival of law enforcement. Upon their arrival, I recounted the harrowing ordeal, surrendering my weapon as evidence. Despite the assailant's claims of assault, the authorities deemed the evidence inconclusive, resulting in no charges being filed against either party. Though the incident left me shaken, I harbored a sense of relief that it had not escalated further. In the aftermath, I grappled with the possibility of encountering the assailant again, haunted by the lingering specter of that fateful encounter. Yet, as time passed without incident, I found solace in the hope of putting the ordeal behind me, grateful for the safety and freedom preserved amidst the chaos of that night. It was the year 2004, and I found myself behind the wheel as a taxi driver, a profession that, at the time, seemed to suit me perfectly. The independence it offered was enticing, yet little did I realize the inherent risks that came with the job. Over the course of 5 years working in this capacity, I encountered numerous challenges, but none as harrowing as the incident I'm about to recount. One late Thursday evening, business was slower than usual. I lingered around a local college, hoping to snag a fare. There was a designated spot near the front where taxis queued up, a customary practice back then. With 2 cars ahead of me, I patiently awaited my turn. Suddenly, a young man hopped into my back seat, his appearance somewhat nondescript save for the hood obscuring most of his face. There was an air of unease about him that I couldn't quite pinpoint. Without uttering a word, the young man handed me a slip of paper with an address scrawled upon it, a departure from the usual verbal exchange. The destination was a house located nearly 45 minutes away, in a more remote part of the city. Despite my apprehension, I nodded in acknowledgement and initiated the journey. As we traversed the familiar route, the young man remained ominously silent, his gaze fixed upon me through the rearview mirror, an unsettling sensation. About halfway to our destination, while navigating a desolate stretch of highway, the young man abruptly broke his silence, instructing me to pull over. Bewildered by his request, I hesitated, apprehensive about our surroundings. His persistence, however, left me with little choice but to comply. As I brought the vehicle to a stop on the darkened roadside, another car pulled up behind us, followed swiftly by another, effectively boxing us in. A surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins as the gravity of the situation dawned upon me. It was a setup. Men emerged from both vehicles, their intentions unmistakably clear. I felt powerless, trapped between them with no means of escape. Though I possessed a firearm in the car, retrieving it seemed futile given the circumstances. Before I could react, the young man in my back seat unlocked the door, granting them access. Demanding my valuables, they relieved me of my earnings, a substantial sum I had yet to deposit. With no resistance to offer, I relinquished everything, paralyzed by shock. Ordered out of my own vehicle, I complied, watching helplessly as they sped away into the night, leaving me stranded miles from civilization. Alone and vulnerable, I embarked on a solitary trek along the desolate highway, hoping to flag down a passing vehicle. After what felt like an eternity, a kind-hearted couple offered me refuge, transporting me to the nearest police station. There, I recounted the ordeal to 2 officers, providing every detail I could recall. The following day, authorities located my abandoned taxi mere miles from the site of the robbery. Despite the loss of my belongings, the vehicle remained intact, save for the fingerprints left behind, a crucial lead that ultimately led to the apprehension of the perpetrators. Each received a sentence of less than a year, a seemingly lenient outcome given the trauma inflicted upon me. Though justice was served, the incident left an indelible mark on me. While I continued to drive for a few more years thereafter, I remained acutely aware of the inherent risks inherent in my profession. Yet, despite the hardships endured, I found solace in the resilience that carried me through, grateful, above all, to have emerged from the ordeal unscathed. This occurred approximately 5 years ago when I was a high school student. I resided in a suburban area, attending a school roughly 15 minutes away. It was the largest high school in the vicinity, accommodating approximately 2,500 students, some of whom commuted from distant parts of our city. Consequently, my circle of friends hailed from various corners of our metropolis. Among them was my friend Mark, who lived in a secluded house nestled within the mountains, a considerable distance from our suburban enclave. His family's abode, an expansive, aged structure, was ensconced amidst thick woodlands. Occasionally, I would venture to his residence to socialize, engaging in activities such as playing video games or embarking on exploratory forays into the adjacent woods. Joining me on these excursions were often Andre and Ben, acquaintances who shared the same penchant for adventure. We would make the trek to Mark's abode once per week, with the journey spanning approximately 45 minutes each way. Typically, I assumed the role of chauffeur, a task facilitated by my lenient parents who readily granted me access to our family vehicle. On a typical Friday evening, the three of us embarked on our customary pilgrimage to Mark's domicile. With Mark's parents absent, we reveled in the liberty of having the house to ourselves. As the night wore on, we congregated on Mark's rear deck, indulging in casual conversation and libations, whilst basking in the splendor of the starry firmament, a welcome respite from the urban glare. It was well past midnight when we finally bid adieu to our gracious host. Ben, succumbing to the effects of imbibing, opted to spend the night while Andre expressed a desire to return home. We bid farewell to Mark and embarked on our descent down the mountainous terrain. Conversations ebbed and flowed as we navigated the winding gravel roads, illuminated by the ethereal glow of the full moon. Suddenly, a sense of disquietude permeated the air as we rounded a sharp bend. Standing in the center of the road was a disheveled figure, frantically signaling for our attention. I instinctively brought the vehicle to a halt, perplexed by the sight of an individual traversing these desolate environs at such an ungodly hour. Approaching the vehicle, the man, appearing to be in his early 20s, relayed a tale of misfortune, claiming to have become disoriented within the surrounding woods. His demeanor, though agitated, exuded a palpable aura of desperation that gave credence to his narrative. However, skepticism gnawed at the periphery of my consciousness, prompting a momentary hesitation. Conferencing with Andre, who occupied the passenger seat, we found ourselves at an impasse. With the onus of decision squarely upon my shoulders, I weighed the options before me. Reluctantly, I conveyed our inability to accommodate the stranger, citing logistical constraints as the mitigating factor. Yet, as our discourse continued, the man's demeanor underwent a subtle metamorphosis, his narrative assuming an increasingly dubious trajectory. References to a nebulous pursuer lurking within the woodland recesses lent an air of implausibility to his account. Sensing a burgeoning sense of unease, I resolved to extricate ourselves from the situation post-haste. As I initiated our departure, the man, dropping to his knees in supplication, beseeched us for aid. An unsettling tableau unfolded before us, punctuating our collective disquietude. Pressing onward, we were met with a sight that sent shivers cascading down our spines. A shadowy figure materializing from the sylvan gloom, his gaze fixed upon our retreating vehicle. Engulfed in a miasma of trepidation, we hastened our retreat, the pall of uncertainty casting a pall over our nocturnal odyssey. Engaging in fervent speculation, we conjectured upon the potential ramifications of our decision. The specter of a malevolent scheme loomed large in our collective psyche, engendering a newfound appreciation for the fragility of our mortal coil. In the ensuing days, my thoughts gravitated incessantly towards the enigmatic encounter, the specter of malevolence haunting the periphery of my consciousness. While the passage of time assuaged the immediate terror of that fateful night, the memory lingered, an indelible testament to the capricious whims of fate.